Imagine a young woman, barely a whisper past childhood, thrust into a world of power, a world of treachery. This is the story of Lady Jane Grey, a girl of keen intellect and gentle heart, whose life was a tapestry woven with threads of both promise and tragedy. Born into a lineage that brushed against the very heart of the English monarchy, Jane was a descendant of King Henry VII through her grandmother, Mary Tudor. This lineage, however, would prove to be both her blessing and her curse, placing her within tantalizing reach of the throne, yet ultimately leading to her doom. From a tender age, Jane exhibited a thirst for knowledge and a piety rare in one so young. While other girls her age chased frivolous pursuits, Jane immersed herself in the world of books, mastering languages and devouring philosophical treatises. Her sharp mind and quiet wisdom did not go unnoticed, marking her as a pawn in the dangerous game of Tudor politics. The seeds of Jane's tragic fate were sown in the waning years of King Edward VI's reign. Edward, a frail king clinging to life, was the son of Henry VIII and Jane Seymour. His death loomed, casting a long shadow over England's future. Enter the ambitious Duke of Northumberland, a man hungry for power and determined to see his bloodline on the throne. He orchestrated a cunning plan, exploiting the young king's fear of a Catholic resurgence under his half-sister Mary. Northumberland, with a serpent's tongue, convinced Edward to name Jane as his heir, bypassing both Mary and Elizabeth, Henry VIII's daughters. The dying king, swayed by Northumberland's machinations and his own desire to protect the Protestant faith, agreed. He signed a document altering the line of succession, unwittingly setting the stage for a tumultuous power struggle and sealing the fate of the innocent Lady Jane Grey. On July 6, 1553, Edward VI breathed his last. Lady Jane Grey, a reluctant pawn in a game she barely understood, was declared Queen of England. Thrust into the spotlight, Jane was crowned, a heavy crown upon her head, and an even heavier burden on her young shoulders. The people, however, were far from united in their acceptance. Whispers of illegitimacy followed Jane, the shadow of the true heir Mary looming large. Despite her lineage, Jane was seen by many as a usurper, a girl who had stolen a throne that was not rightfully hers. Despite the turmoil, Jane, ever the picture of grace and fortitude, attempted to rule with fairness and wisdom. She surrounded herself with advisers, immersing herself in matters of state. But her reign, like a fleeting summer storm, would be short-lived, destined to be washed away by the winds of change. As the days of Jane's reign unfolded, doubts and discontent festered within the very walls of the court. Many who had initially sworn allegiance to Jane began to waver, their loyalty shifting towards the rightful heir, Mary. Mary, gathering support in East Anglia, was a formidable opponent, her claim to the throne bolstered by the love of the people. The whispers grew louder, evolving into open pronouncements of support for Mary. Jane's grip on the throne, always tenuous, began to slip. Inside her chambers, Jane felt the weight of the kingdom bearing down on her. The crown, once a symbol of power, now felt like an iron shackle, binding her to a destiny she had never desired. Her brief taste of power had left her weary, the burden of a kingdom too heavy for her young shoulders to bear. Mary, with the roar of a lioness defending her birthright, marched on London, her army swelling with each passing day. The people, hungry for a return to stability and tradition, flocked to her banner. The tide had turned, and Jane, surrounded by crumbling support and mounting fear, found herself facing an enemy she could not defeat. Northumberland, the architect of Jane's ill-fated reign, attempted to rally troops to salvage his crumbling plan, but the people's loyalty lay with Mary, their rightful queen. Defeated and deserted, Northumberland was arrested, his ambitions ultimately proving to be his downfall. Within the Tower of London, Jane watched as her short-lived reign crumbled around her. She was a queen without a crown, a ruler without a kingdom, a victim of circumstance caught in the crosshairs of history. Her fate, once bright with promise, now seemed destined for tragedy. With Mary's triumphant entry into London, Jane's brief reign came to an abrupt and unceremonious end. Accused of treason, she was imprisoned within the very walls that had once housed her as queen. The Tower of London, once a symbol of her fleeting power, now served as a stark reminder of her fall from grace. Confined to her chambers, stripped of her title and freedom, Jane faced an uncertain future. The hope that had flickered briefly during her reign, the hope of a brighter future for England, now dwindled with each passing day. Yet even in captivity, Jane's spirit remained unbroken. She found solace in her books, her faith a beacon in the encroaching darkness. She wrote letters, eloquent pleas for mercy, her words dripping with the pain of a life unfairly interrupted, a destiny cruelly denied. Mary, now secure on the throne, faced a difficult choice. Mercy for Jane, her cousin, could be seen as a sign of weakness, a threat to her newfound power. Yet to execute her, a young woman who had been but a pawn in a larger game, seemed a cruel and unnecessary act. The court, however, urged a harsher sentence, fearing that leniency would invite rebellion, and so the verdict was delivered, a cruel pronouncement that sent shockwaves through the nation. Lady Jane Grey was to be executed for the crime of treason. The news of Jane's impending execution spread like wildfire through the streets of London. Even those who had opposed her claim to the throne were moved by her plight, recognizing the injustice of her fate. Petitions for clemency, signed by commoners and nobles alike, flooded the palace, but Mary, consumed by her own insecurities and fears, remained unmoved. On a cold February morning in 1554, Lady Jane Grey, barely 17 years old, was led from her chambers to the executioner's block erected within the confines of the Tower of London. Dressed in black, her face pale but composed, she ascended the steps with a grace and dignity that belied her youth and the tragedy that had befallen her. With her final words, Jane addressed the crowd gathered to witness her execution, her voice steady, her spirit unbowed. She spoke of her innocence, of her unwavering faith, and of her acceptance of God's will. And then, with a final prayer on her lips, she knelt, her head bowed, awaiting the executioner's blow. The executioner's axe fell, silencing forever the voice of a young woman whose intelligence and compassion had promised so much, yet whose life had been cut tragically short by the machinations of ambitious men and the cruel hand of fate. Lady Jane Grey's brief and tragic reign serves as a poignant reminder of the human cost of ambition and the fragility of power. Her story, passed down through generations, continues to resonate with audiences, her name synonymous with innocence lost and potential unfulfilled. Though denied her rightful place in history as Queen of England, Jane's legacy lives on. She is remembered not as a usurper, but as a victim of circumstance, a young woman of great intellect and even greater heart, whose life was cut tragically short. Her story serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder that even in the pursuit of power and glory, there are lines that should never be crossed, sacrifices that should never be made, and so the tale of Lady Jane Grey, the 9 Days Queen, continues to be told and retold, ensuring that her memory, though forever intertwined with tragedy, will never be forgotten.